Okay, welcome to Positivity Bias. We're on chapter 13, Rehearsal for Redemption. And so one of the things that I've noticed over the years that has been a challenge, we've had a lot of people who connected with, well, let me start it this way. Chabad houses around the country have recently stopped serving matzo ball soup Friday night because the college campus students don't recognize it as a Jewish thing. We all remember Bubby's matzo ball soup, and Shabbos and Yom Tov matzo ball soup. That was like a connection to being a Jewish thing, right? And if you had Jewish food, that was a connection to Judaism in a way as well, right? And that's gone. The kids in college today don't know about chicken soup. They don't know about matzo ball soup, and then they don't know about Jewish stuff like that. And their Bubby is not the one they go to for holidays anymore. It's kind of past. So what's the connection now? We have to be reaching deeper into the soul with deeper stuff than just the tangible Jewish things like matzo balls. And part of this is also associated with, and again, this is a conversation I've had with folks at Jewish war veterans as well, is that for many of us, fighting anti-Semitism is a part of being Jewish. It's a part of being Jewish as much as matzo ball soup is. But it's not a pleasant part of being Jewish. And it's not something that younger people relate to anymore. So if you joined the Anti-Defamation League or JDL or Jewish war veterans because you want to be a part of fighting anti-Semitism, the younger people don't relate to that, and it's not on their agenda. Mm-hmm. So what is? Where's the continuity of Yiddishkeit coming from? And I think that, in the essence, is a part of what this chapter is about, is going deeper to a deeper source. And the source is simcha, is joy. We say in the Shema Yisrael prayer, we shall love Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. If we have that connection with God, if we understand our relationship with God, that's enough to be joyous every day. That's if we understand that there's a God in the world and nothing happens outside of God, and God wants only the best for us, then everything is wonderful, and we should be dancing in the street all the time. So the pain part of it is not the core of Judaism and what brings people back and what keeps people involved. Joy is. So this chapter begins with a very painful story. Most of you are familiar with Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel was a very prominent figure in sharing the Holocaust stories and in understanding the depth of the pain of all of that. He was a teenager when he watched his father be killed in Auschwitz. And at that moment, if you've read his book, he wrote it originally in Yiddish, Nacht. It was translated into languages all over the world. It's called Night. His father actually was in Buchenwald, not Auschwitz, Buchenwald. And from that moment, he had no emotions anymore. He shut down. There was a time in the 1960s when he had published the Gates of the Forest, 1964, and it was kind of a story about his interview, his relationship with Lubavitcher Rebbe. He went to visit the Rebbe, because he grew up from a Hasidic family. I mean, obviously they all perished in the war. But he grew up in a Hasidic family, so he went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he visited, and their conversation went on for hours. And the Rebbe oftentimes asked him, "But what can I do for you? How can I help?" And he kept saying, "Nothing, nothing, nothing." But somewhere a few into the wee hours of the morning, he realized that no, he did want something from the Rebbe. And what is that? He said, I want you to make me cry. You know, essentially what he was saying is, I've lost emotions. I shut down as a teenager in Buchenwald when my father was killed, and I don't have the emotions anymore. I don't know how to mourn after the trauma. And there was a pause, and the Rebbe's response was, I will teach you how to sing. So in his response, the Rebbe was not diminishing the pain and not diminishing that the need to be able to get it all out, to express the pain and the anguish, to be able to cry through all of that and express all that anguish. But that's not the goal. The goal has to be able to sing, to rejoice, to celebrate, to fully embrace life. And I think that's the primary story about what we're focusing on here, is the goal of never again is only a partial goal. That doesn't suffice to keep up the next generations. What's necessary is to understand our relationship with God and the power of that, which should bring joy at all times. You know, there's another story in this chapter about a father was relating his challenges about his kids and keeping them involved in Yiddishkeit. And he admits to the Rebbe that one of his frequent comments is, it's so schwer zu sein a Yidden. It's hard to be Jewish. And the Rebbe explained, yeah, well, that's the message you've given to your kids. That's the underlying message. This is hard. And there's another phrase in Yiddish, it's good to sein a Yid. It's good to be Jewish, right? That's a whole different refrain. Which one brings joy? Which one brings happiness? What do you want to come back for more, right? So schwer zu sein a Yid is difficult? No. You want to come back because it's great. It's wonderful. But to do that, one has to dig deeper to understand the relationship between God and the Jewish people. To understand that we have a chelik elikal mimal mamish, an actual essential part of God within us. And that essential part is totally connected to God and can never be extinguished. And all it needs is a little fanning to warm up that fire, right? And then it be exuberant. And life can be great. You have to fan the fire. You have to warm that up. And that means delving into the relationship between God and the Jewish people, getting a better understanding about who God is and what that looks like, and how we're a part of that, why that's meaningful to us. I met someone at the march at the mall, at the National Mall this last year. And it was someone who had grown up only seeing schwer zu sein a Yid. It's difficult being Jewish. That's all he knew about it. He didn't have a day school to go to. He didn't have bar mitzvah lessons. All he knew was schwer zu sein a Yid and the anti-Semitism that he heard in school all the time. That was his Judaism. The opportunity to learn about our history, the opportunity to learn about our relationship with God, that is what spurs on the relationship and fans the flame of being involved. And that's what brings us joy. And so for years and years, Judaism had been, hundreds of years, Judaism had been basically a very somber faith, where, throughout the Dark Ages and all the challenges in Europe, we've got a hard history. We do. We have a really tough history. And so there was this somber relationship with God of, here's what we need, and praying to God for what we need. But it was very challenging, and how much more so after the Holocaust. So there's an interesting story in this chapter about Zalman Jaffe. It's a Chabad Chassid from London, from England, and he's very close to the Rebbe, and he used to come to New York and join the Rebbe for Yom Tov, for meals, for holiday, to be there for a holiday with the Rebbe, and actually join the Rebbe in his household for some of the meals. And Zalman Jaffe, at one point, he asked the Rebbe, like, how come I don't see any joyful songs in the davening? In services at the shul in 770 Brooklyn, New York, right? Eastern Parkway. Lubavitch World Headquarters. How come we don't have? Well, we sing the traditional nigunim that we've always sung, and they're somber. They evoke deep emotions, but they're somber. And he was suggesting that there should be some singing, some real spiritually uplifting tunes. And so that he was suggesting that there should be happy nigunim should be sung. And the Rebbe said, that's your fault. What do you mean, sir? You didn't start the songs, and so it didn't happen. He says, I'm only a soldier. I'm not, I'm not in charge. And the Rebbe smiled and says, okay, I'm commanding you, sing. So the next day at services on Yom Tov, hundreds and hundreds of Hasidim in the shul, and there's just one voice that starts singing a niggin in the davening. And people around him tried to shush him because it's a shul, right? And who are you anyway? You're a guest in town, right? So after shul, someone went to reprimand him for trying to start something new in the Rebbe's shul. And he told him, I was commanded, I'm a soldier, I was commanded to start the niggin. And the guy says, oh, if that's the case. And the next day, everyone in shul joined. Then everyone sang, and it became, and from that point on, there were certain things you could see the Rebbe encouraging it. Like the Rebbe's in the front, up on the podium with his stender, and when the singing started, he would be like doing this with the tune, right? And of course, that gets everybody jumping and more excited, right? And so the Rebbe was encouraging the singing now, and things were changing over. But it's the acknowledgement we're talking about is not only the power of joy to unite everyone and to encourage everyone, but also the power of leadership to make necessary changes when things are shifting. I'm all into, obviously, I appreciate traditions and traditions in Judaism, traditions of Havdil in the military. I get all that, but there's also a saying, that what is tradition? That's peer pressure from dead people. So it takes courage from a leader to be able to step out of what's always been done, the way we've always done it, and make changes because of the environment has changed and what people need. And the Rebbe saw clearly back in the 60s that the Jewish world of today needs joy, needs simcha. Now, I remember There was a time in the 70s, 1971 was Purim. Was Purim in 1971, and there was a Fabringen, and the people were gathered together, and the Rebbe was encouraging the singing and encouraging the singing. Everybody was jumping and singing and encouraging. And then he turned to Meir Michal Abasera. Dr. Abasera is from a generation of Mikubalim, mystics, Sephardic mystics from Israel, from Sfas. And he's American. He has a doctorate and science doctorate and everything. But he's his family comes back from a long line of Sephardic Mikubalim. And the Rebbe turned around. I can see this in my vision. I wasn't there, but I saw the same thing happen numerous times later. The Rebbe turned around during the Fabringen and turned to Meir Michal and did this. He just motioned to him with his fingers like this to his mouth. And Meir Michal was like, first of all, who's the Rebbe talking to? Number one, and like, is he suggesting whistling? Like loud whistling? That's like, you don't do that in shul. And yet the Rebbe was, yeah, you. So he got up the guts and he started whistling, and the Rebbe encouraged the whistling. And Michal was like, he was whoa, it was like really as loud and hard as he could. I mean, his whole bottom lip was burbling. It was really fun. And then people started as well. And it raised the tempo in the entire room. It raised the energy of everyone in the room to be even more powerful, even stronger, to really push the limits on it. And then this became a thing at Fabringens, at joyous Fabringens. The Rebbe would oftentimes turn to Meir Michal and then it would start. And everyone in the shul that knew how to do it would, I even tried to learn. I never figured it out how to do that. But can anybody do that? You guys know how to do that with the? No? But you've seen it, right? So it's loud and it's piercing, and you get a whole room full of people doing it. It can be amazing, right? So somebody, a photographer in 1975, at a Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan Fabringen, a photographer actually caught this on camera and published it in one of the Jewish newspapers. Well, all the naysayers now had an opportunity to comment about the Rebbe encouraging such disrespectful behavior in a shul at a religious gathering. And so a whole bunch of naysayers started commenting. And week after week, there was always somebody making some negative comment about, we don't do things this way. So after a while, a few weeks later, the Rebbe at the Purim Fabringen that same year, right? At the Purim Fabringen, the Rebbe had commented that months have gone by, and in the meantime, I thought that someone would come up in all the debate that was going on publicly. I thought that someone would come up with Torah sources for this idea of whistling, but since no one has, I guess I will. And then he started bringing up examples of within the written Torah and the oral Torah of whistling, the idea of whistling to encourage uninhibited, unreserved joy, ecstatic expressions of involvement in a mitzvah. And he brought a number of different sources from Torah about this as being so one of the examples, not necessarily about the whistling, but of unbridled joy, that's recorded in the book of Samuel, where the Ark of the Covenant had been lost in battle. The Philistine had stolen it. And if you read if you read the Sefer, if you read the book of Samuel, it caused them nothing but problems, the Philistine. And so at some point they wanted to return it, and we were able to go back and bring the Iron Kodesh back. And as it was the Ark of the Covenant was being brought back into Yerushalayim, there was a celebration, there was a whole parade, and David HaMelech, the king of Israel, was leading the parade, dancing and doing somersaults. And now, of course, his wife, who was the daughter of the previous king, King Saul, she was unimpressed, let's put it that way. And her comment later to her husband was, "My father would never have behaved like that in public, period. My father would never behave like that." And of course, David's response is, "That's why your father lost the kingdom." But what was David doing? We were bringing back the luchos, the tablets, the Ark of the Covenant back to its home in Yerushalayim. There should be unbridled joy. There should be ecstatic behavior. And if the king is going to behave like that, then everyone else is going to. And so that joy, that exuberance would then be, that whole mitzvah would be lifted up with all the power and the energy of that excitement and exuberance, unbridled, unrestrained joy. And so this is what we're talking about, is that capacity to celebrate our relationship with God in a way that advances our relationship and advances, we talk about the idea of a bride and groom getting married, right? And the Talmud tells us about great sages, tremendous wisdom, scholars at a wedding juggling myrtle branches and juggling with fire and behaving frivolously, right? Well, if the sage is doing that, then that gets everybody else excited too, right? Except some people are going to comment about, the naysayers, there's always naysayers, about how disrespectful it is to behave like that, right? But that joy breaks all the boundaries. And the idea of a chassan and kala, bride and groom getting married, that you're touching the infinite, because it's not just about them, it's the generations that they will produce, generation after generation. That's the future of the world. That's touching the infinite. If you can't celebrate unboundedly at a chasana, then you're missing the point. Chasana is a phenomenal touch to the infinite, right? So to be able to tap into that brings unbridled joy, right? So the Baal Shem Tov used to teach that we have to strive, we have to try to bring joy, that level of joy, to all of our mitzvahs, to everything we do in Torah, to be able to bring joy and exuberance in everything. It says in the Perkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, that all of our actions should be l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. So essentially it means that eating, sleeping, business, leisure, everything we do should be in the service of God. And Tamid B'Simcha, we should always be joyful because we're serving God, right? In everything we do. So in all of our daily activities, eating, sleeping, business, leisure, that should be done joyfully, because if we're doing it in the service of God, it should be done joyfully, and it should be with a nod to the infinite. That if we're doing things for the service of God, in a way of knowing God, in a way of relating to God, then that should bring joy, even into the daily mundane things. It was not uncommon. So Hasidim, the name Hasidim is a more recent name. The name of what Hasidim were called before that name was tagged to us. Hasidim were called the Freiliche, the happy ones, the joyful ones, right? Because they were joyful in every mitzvah they did, because that's what Hasidus teaches us, that this mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah, right, making a bracha on the foods that you're eating, lighting Shabbos candles, putting on tefillin, this is what's connecting us with God. This is what's connecting us with infinity. This should bring joy in everything that we do. If we're sitting down and eating at a Shabbos or Yom Tov meal, Pesach, the Seder is coming, right? And how can one be anything other than tremendously joyful? I know we're tired, but but to be completely joyful at a Seder, because this is our quality private time with the King of the universe, with the Creator himself. This is quality time together. That should bring unbridled joy, and we have to serve God with all of that joy. There's an interesting story. Reb Dov Ber, who was the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, he had a group of Kapelia, a choir. He had a choir in his synagogue, and he also had Selena, you're gonna like this. He had a group of horseback riders who were stunt riders, and they, on special occasions, they used to entertain the community. Right?
I'd like
and so there was this weekday where the Rebbe, Reb Dov Ber, called out the choir and called out the horseback riders and said, let's make a festival event. And so on the middle of a week, some Tuesday evening, they had this whole thing with the a cappella was singing. There was a concert, and there was the horseback riders doing their stunts, and it was a whole joyous event. Reb Dov Ber, one of his sons, Reb Nochem was one of the riders. The Rebbe's son, Reb Nochem, was one of the riders, and there was an accident, and he fell. And they told the Rebbe, because they wanted to stop the event. This is the Rebbe's son. They wanted to stop the event, and the Rebbe said, "Keep it up. Raise the stakes. Make it even greater." Right? And a little while later, they found that Reb Nochem was okay. He was going to be fine. They thought it was very, very serious, but Baruch Hashem, it wasn't, and he's going to be fine, right? But the Hasidim asked the Rebbe, like, your son got injured. Like, why didn't you stop everything? And furthermore, by the way, why did you call this event on a middle of a Tuesday for nothing? Like, what? Why do you call the happy occasion? So that explains that he had seen earlier in the heavenly realms, because some people have access to what's going on up there, and he had seen a not good decree against his son. Things were not well for his son in the spiritual realm. And so, therefore, he called for the event to bring joy into the world. And that joy of Jews connecting with God was a mitigating circumstance to the decrees against his son. And when his son had only fallen, well, it didn't completely vanquish the decrees against him, but he felt the need to increase the joy to change the stakes. And only when his son was, thank God he's fine and he'll be okay, that's when it's okay, then we can call off the evening now. So the joy sweetens the attribute of gevura, of strictness. And I think of, and we've all been in circumstances where it's been it's been a bad day and things are really sour and you are feeling in a really ugly mood. And you may have been taking it out on other family members. Reminds me of the cartoon where dad comes home and he's in a bad mood, so he yells at his wife and she barks at the kid and the kid kicks the dog. You know, it's like,
Rolls downhill.
it all rolls downhill. You know that, right? So
We'll knock it off, Pat.
so the idea is that simcha, joy, let's say that person, dad comes in and he's had a bad day, right? But all of a sudden he gets a call from an old friend he hasn't seen in years. And all of a sudden he's happy. Well, the whole day was lousy. Yeah, but now it's happy. And it changed the whole course of the evening. So if we can conscientiously bring in the joy, if we can make a conscientious decision to dance when there's no reason to, then that can break the severity of the decrees from on high. One of the other classes, we were learning a Sikha discourse. Khalil, you'll remember this one, right? We are learning a Sikha that talks about an arousal from above, arousal from below, and an arousal from above. So in other words, there are times when we get this spiritual awakening that seems to come out of the blue. And that means that God's arousing us in his own miraculous way, right? But there's sometimes when we work on it ourselves, when we study of Torah and have discussions about Torah, and we have classes like this, where we arouse within ourselves a deeper understanding of the relationship we have with God, and we bring on the joy. And as we bring on the joy, there's a response. There's a response from heaven. If we create the joy in our relationship with God, God's got to smile. And that smile then changes the decree. I have a picture in my mind of, why was it always the boys that did? Anyway, I have a picture in my mind of one of my kids, and he was a little one at that time, and he was in trouble, man. He had really been in trouble, right? But he came in with this sweet little face and, Dad, you know, and he, kind of a little dancing into the room, and what am I going to do, right? I mean, come on. As much as he deserved the punishment, he's just so cute, right? What are you going to do, right?
They know it too.
And they know it, yes. And I someone told me the other day, when his sister had a little boy,
Mm-hmm.
he was so thrilled to be an uncle, and he had never realized that how powerful this could be. And this is a kid he would die for. This is a kid he would die for, right? When his sister had a baby girl and he met the little baby girl, he realized, this is someone I would kill for. I gotta say, I'm blessed with 6 daughters, and every one of them has got daddy wrapped around her little finger. But that's the thing. When God looks down at us and we come in with this joy and this sheepish grin, and like, okay, I know I blew it, but still, we have this relationship, right? If we focus on the relationship, it changes the decrees from on heaven. God responds to our joy in the mitzvahs, our joy in our relationship with him. He responds to that. And that nullifies simcha paretz gather. Joy breaks through all boundaries. And you've seen people behaving like that, right? Joy breaks through all boundaries. So the idea then is that if we can use this joy to focus on our relationship with God and the mitzvahs that we do and the challenges that we face. One of my chaplain quotes is, don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is. Right? Whatever's going down, my God can fix this. My God can get me through this. Doesn't matter how big the problem is. I had a friend who, his father-in-law had asked him, so what are you going to do for a living? And he said, my father's the chairman of the board. We're good. And he said, yeah, really? Which company? God Almighty. He's the chairman of the whole world. If we have our bitachon that God can get us through whatever it is, then we can already celebrate. We can already be joyful because we know the end. How many of you have ever started reading a book and started getting nervous and had to flip to the end to make sure it was going to turn out okay, right? So I've done that numerous times. It's like, I don't know if I want to know this story. Let me flip to the end to find out if they all survive. Okay, it's safe. I can read this, right? We as Jews, we know the end of this story. Mashiach comes, there is world peace, and there's joy throughout the world, and we have a tight connection with God. We're in the lead of the parade. We know the end of the story. So why are you sweating the little stuff in between? Go straight to the end. Start being joyous. Know the Mashiach is coming. Know that it will be a joyous end, and be happy now because you know it already. Don't wait. Celebrate now. And when we come with that absolute conviction of, I know how this story ends, and we come out shining, and there is world peace, and everything gets resolved. In a mystery novel, you got all these twisted and tangled things, right? But the really good mysteries, everything gets resolved by the end. Every different twist and tangle, all of that gets unraveled and smooth, and that makes for a very nice novel, right? We're going to see all that. We have questions now. God, how could you, right? We have those questions, a lot of those questions. We have them right now in our lives. But it's all going to be resolved. We're going to see that. And so if we can go to the end of the story now and live with that, we can get through anything, and we can know that we can already start to celebrate. And the fact that we're already celebrating means, what do we have to worry about the end yet? Right? Menachem Mendel Goldblum should rest in peace. His memory should be for a blessing. He was my son, my Marine Corps son. He was my Marine Corps son's battle buddy. They went into the Marine Corps together. They went through basic together. They went through the cauldron together. So if anyone knows the Marines, the last part of basic is called the cauldron. And it's like a half-week long, the worst of the worst, and then add some pepper into that, right? And Mendel, like 24 hours into the cauldron, Mendel was like, now we're playing. Now we're in. This is great. And so like everybody else who was already struggling and couldn't see the end was encouraged by Mendel, because he was like, yeah, now the game is playing. Now we're on. And he was already at the finish line, man. He's done, right? And so he was celebrating all the way through the cauldron. And that changed it for everybody around him as well. And that's our job. That's our job as Jews, is to be a light unto the world, to know what the end of the story is, and to start celebrating already, because it's going to be amazing. It's going to be beautiful, and all the loose ends of the puzzles are all going to be figured out, and there'll only be celebration, and there'll be a massive reunion. Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. It's going to be a massive reunion. You know what kind of party this is going to be? it's going to be phenomenal. So we need to have our mindset. Jack Canfield, when he talks about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? He talks about the idea of have the end in mind. Know what your goal is, have the end in mind, and then you work towards your goals. In the military, we talk about SMART goals, specific and measurable, etc. But that idea of if you have your goal in mind, then you'll be attracted to it, and it'll pull you through the tough times, right? So the same thing. We have to have Mashiach in mind. We have to have the final reunion party in Yerushalayim in mind, with Mashiach, with the Beis Hamikdash, with Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Moshe and Aaron, Rashi, the Rambam, the Rebbe. Can you imagine the reunion? So we have to be in that party mode here and now in Gullus, because this journey is to that goal. It's to that end. And this is necessary to get there. So let's start the party. Simcha parts together. Joy breaks all boundaries. What do you walk away with?
Do you remember, B'nai Reuben, when I used to come up and Ziggy was there and Donald was there?
Yeah.
And I used to introduce a tradition that we used to do back in our show, singing the song after the Torah was put away before the rabbi spoke. And I remember Rabbi Wolf, his face lit up when we were singing and harmonizing, and he started waving his arm like the rabbi did. Yeah, he was doing that. And his face was all lit up, and he says, "You continue doing this. This is good." Saying hara.
Yeah. Bring in the joy.
Enjoy.
Bring in the joy. Anybody else? What do you walk away with from tonight? Don't wait for me to call on you, because I will.
Actually, this definitely relates to something that happened today. Part of this organization with my school where we publish a literary journal, and today, just luckily, during one of our meetings, of course, the internet across the entire district went down, and I go to the district chair. She's having this terrible day. She's saying, "Oh my gosh, everything sucks. Our whole network is down. I can't get anything in. This is just today's just not it." And to that, I was trying to help her out with some of the stuff that we had to do offline. And when I told her, I said, "Hey, you know what? If we didn't have the bad days, we wouldn't appreciate the good ones." And to that, she said, "You're right." And then I left that room with a smile on my face, and she couldn't keep the smile off hers.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Excellent. Absolutely right. So Khanil,
Yes.
share the story about the solar eclipse.
Oh, okay. So where we're at, we got 98.6 of the percent of the solar eclipse, and where my daughter's station, where Fort Cavazos used to be called Fort Hood, they had 100%, and so they had complete darkness, but we didn't. And just that one little percent difference between us and them, that 1.4%, just that little bit of light, we still had daylight here, and it's dark there, and it's kind of amazing how just a little bit of light can shine in that darkness is basically what I put together, or not my wife did. I'm not that smart.
Right. A little bit of light makes all the difference in the world. You bring in a joy in a tough situation, and it can break it. I've probably shared this story. I'm sure I shared this story, but I'll repeat it again. This is the story I shared at my dad's funeral, actually. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I was probably 14. My sister was 16, and as a family, we were out at Mesa Verde National Park, and we've been out there, at the park. And at some point, the rangers came by and they said that there's a sniper loose in the park and he's shooting at people. So get to your parking lot, get to your car, and everybody on the floor except the driver. Driver, sit as low as you can and get out of here now. And so, obviously there's a stressful situation and we're all kind of, nervous about this as we head down towards the car. And of course, my sister's 16. She just got her permit and dad takes out the keys and says, "You want to drive, right?" So it was so ludicrous. It broke the stress. That little bit of humor broke the stress. And then we all, ran to the car, but smiling, right? And that's the thing, is to be able to bring the light into that darkness, to bring a joke to the, a reality check of, hey, we only have the Sundays because of the dark days. We only have the joys because of the tough times. It makes us put things in perspective. So, in Chassidus, we talk about a Yerida l'tzarach aliyah, a descent for the sake of an ascent. If you want to build a new building, you have to tear down the old structure first. But the tearing down is for the purpose of building up. So even the tearing down is actually building, which actually has a ramification in Jewish law, right? In Shabbos, you're not allowed to build something, but but tearing something down is not a problem. But if you're tearing it down to build it up, that's part of building, so you can't tear down then. You have to understand the deeper part of it. Selena, you've got a story. Come on.
I can't, the only thing, I don't know if it's a story or not, but I was looking at the photos of submissions for the eclipse, and someone actually saw a Star of David in the eclipse. So I wrote that maybe it's an omen for peace. Sounds good.
I saw, what was the meme that went around about some of the events of recent was the bridge collapse, the earthquake, the eclipse. What's next? Frogs and lice.
Oh, I read that too.